Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us again. Excited for this RepVue conversation with Parm Uppal from Chainguard. Parm is the Chief Revenue Officer and Chief Customer Officer at Chainguard. So we're excited to get some perspective from him. Welcome, Parm.
Yeah, well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So first off, super excited to get to speak with you. Chainguard is, I would say, confidently say, is one of the hottest companies on RepVue, both in terms of excellent score, but also just consistent interest that we can see from people, both in terms of ratings and also just in terms of people coming and checking out the site. So there's definitely a lot of people with questions, and you have been leading the sales team there for, is it about 5 months now?
Yeah, joined at the start of November.
Okay. Great. So really excited to hear your perspective, just helping people understand what Chainguard is all about, specifically from a sales perspective and what they should expect in 2026. So thanks so much for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. I'm excited. I've been waiting for this one.
Good, good. Well, let's start with you personally. Let's give people who might be listening a little bit of background. Just tell us a little bit about kind of your background, how you grew up, and then sort of how that influences how you approach leading sales teams.
Yeah, no, thank you. So tell by the accent, I'm not a Native American as a
Hmm.
Scotsman living in California. So I ended up moving out here in 2016 with a company called Dynamics that was subsequently acquired by Cisco. But if we kind of trace it back, Scotsman, went to university in England and then went through a series of software jobs. But I think I really started figuring out what was like, how did you repeatably be successful was actually back at BMC Software. And at BMC Software, I had the pleasure of working with some industry titans like John McMahon, Cedric Pesh, Jeremy Duggan, Steve McCluskey, Don Darcy. And I joined at a unique time. They just acquired a company called Blade Logic and they'd had a couple of years in there. And I remember my kind of first kind of conversation felt somewhat like a cult. And I remember like Jeremy Duggan actually saying to me, he goes, "Hey, you're good, but you don't know why you're good." Right. And he
Mm,
goes, "You don't know why you're good. You don't know how to repeat it. And if you can't repeat it, because you can't scale." So I went and told my wife that night when I went home. I was like, she goes, "Sounds like you're joining a cult." And upon reflection, it probably was like that, given the fact that, a lot of people from BMC went to Mongo, a lot of people from BMC went to App Dynamics, who went to
mhm,
Sprinkler. So there's a big lineage back to John McMahon type companies, often referred to as kind of playbook companies. Obviously, I've been in the US for 10 years, but my kind of leadership style and kind of how I get involved with the field and the sales org is really, I kind of think of myself as what I call a field general. I'll never ask anybody to do something that I won't show them how to do it. That's really, really important for me is like, if it's as simple as like doing a cold call or rewriting a three whys or like present a first meeting deck, people's lives are changed when you're in the field, right? So sitting on Zoom and stuff like that, like,
mhm.
bit of an energy drag, but actually being with people in the field is actually where you change their life. So my kind of leadership style and kind of mantra has been very kind of focused in the field because that's where also you're going to learn pricing issues. You're going to learn persona challenges. You're going to learn certain things like, that deck didn't actually land, or we've got a problem in the field around POV execution or building champions, but you need the power of observation. And then that allows you then to kind of come back in and work with the ecosystem and your partners internally to go and solve for that.
Okay. Let's actually dig into that a little bit. So you have a lot of perspective from approaches. I mean, you've been a part of a lot of different sales orgs. If you look at your LinkedIn, it's long, and you've got a variety of experiences. What kinds of different perspective or approaches to sales leadership would you say is sort of notable as a common thread for some of the really great sales orgs that you've been a part of?
Yeah. So I always use the phrase, you can't fake development. So in any hot market, you can throw money at people, equity at people. It's got a massive TAM, could have a whole lot of inbound. But if you really sit with the core of hiring great people, developing them with an inch of their life, the
Hmm.
actual takes care of itself. So we have a very programmatic way we think about this. So it's called recruit, retain, revenue. So how do you kind of operationalize that in our kind of organizations is key. So I look for all my leaders to be kind of development focused. I often ask questions like how many people have been promoted under your tutelage, and I look at the type of companies they've been. But the DNA of world-class sellers at every company I've been at really kind of falls into two camps. They know how to pipeline generate themselves, even though they've got partners coming in, they've got inbound, they've got marketing. they're always smart enough to know that, hey, if I go and pipeline generate, I can set the decision criteria. I can stack the deck in my favor. I can get higher and wider. I can build more champions. And that goes on to my second point.
Hmm.
The world-class sellers I've seen know how to build champions, right? They know how to identify what a champion looks like. They know how to build them. They know how to spend time leveraging them and like throughout like build, test, leverage. So
Hmm.
they're smart at that. This is a common DNA that in most of the organizations I've been in is they're world class around pipeline generation and they're world class around building champions. And doing those two things, then obviously like it fixes their W2 or their P60 or their
Hmm.
earning potential. But also guess what happens? Because they focus on those two things, you're coaching them in the field on that. So it goes away from being very what I would call academic, like to actually being kind of real world application.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So let's for those who might not be aware, let's get some more perspective on Chainguard so that we can look at this conversation through that lens. So just give us your elevator pitch on Chainguard. Tell us what does Chainguard do for
Yeah.
a sales rep who might not be very familiar.
Yeah, very simply, it's the safe source for open source. The 98% of software that is, software applications that are built out there, so 100% of software applications are built out there, 98% of them mostly use open source software. And the problem with open source software is it's inherently not secure. So you go through this cycle of
Hmm.
like, I build it and then I need to go and scan it, and then my engineers have to go and change it. So what the founders, who are a bunch of a few people at Google, figured out, and they've been at the core point of they're some of the founders of like Kubernetes and like
Hmm.
maybe a few other distros and all these kind of projects. But what they actually focused on was, hey, if we just rebuilt the software packages every day that anybody used, whether it was a container, a VM, or a software library, it's secure by default. Because if you think about it, we sell to
Hmm.
three personas: security, engineering, and then obviously the line of business, like the product org or like a revenue org. Now,
Yeah.
security inherently does a scan and goes, hey, see this dashboard? It's got a hell of a lot of red on it. I just want it to go green. The problem
Hmm.
is, person tasked with making it go from red to green is the engineering org. So what the engineering org obviously allows them to do is it allows their developers to be more productive so that they're not spending time doing break fix and remediating CVEs. They're actually spending more time on like basically breaking down a roadmap or a backlog of what the line of business is asking. So if you think about it, that's why we've had this explosive growth. Like the company's only 4 years old. We've been selling for
Hmm.
3. So we're just
Yeah.
getting started. And that's the
It's
thing. We're just getting
impressive.
started right now.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, broadly in the cybersecurity space, specifically, you mentioned open source, but let's dig into that a little more. How does the approach that Chainguard takes differ from other companies in the security space?
Yeah. So firstly, I actually don't like it when we say we're a security company. I actually say we're an
Okay.
engineering company and selling to
All right.
developers. So I would look at it like this: security can report the news, engineering's making the news. So you
Mm,
need to have both sides of the organization bought in that this is change that we want to drive in the business. The reason why we're starting to take the market leading position around this problem area is because we decide that through AI to build each of these software packages daily. Right. So it doesn't matter what it is. So it's like we don't need to wait for somebody upstream to fix it and take that and then just
hmm.
like apply that. We actually rebuild from source daily. So that's actually unique to that. And then we've got SLAs that back that up as well. So if you look at it, like the big focus areas, we're winning big in regulated environments. We're winning big in telco, media, technology, financial services. Even several of the AI, the platform AI guys are using our stuff. So it's when I was doing my due diligence, I was blown away at a company at that point, 2.5 years old, and I was looking at the
Hmm.
roster of logos, and then the logos that we've seen that have come on board. I'm still looking for the gotcha.
Okay. So I noticed the one thing that is somewhat unique is your title is your head of revenue, so head of sales, but also chief customer officer. Help us understand that. It looks like an intentional choice to sort of represent that at the top level in your title. Tell us about your thinking there.
Yeah, very, very simply that if we're not making our customers successful, right,
Hmm.
quickly and driving a rapid time to value, we have a problem. And that goes for any software company nowadays because there's so many magical moments with AI that you need to really be thinking about. There's an intentionality around that. So for me, even how we sell, one of the areas that we're focused on is how do we build a business case and a case for change that's underpinned with a deployment roadmap, but also go into somebody senior and give them a scorecard
Hmm.
months, 6 months, 9 months post go live and say, do you remember the business case that we all worked on the adoption plan around cost savings, cost avoidance, risk mitigation, or process inefficiency? Well, here's how it's playing out in your organization. So there's intentionality around that, that it's a real core focus. And also just in the current guys with software companies, it's much easier to retain and make your customers successful, especially when you're shipping like more and more. We launched VMs and libraries last year, but we started our
Hmm.
first opening act was containers. So the more customers you have that are successful, it's gonna spread into other departments. They're gonna want other products that you're shipping. There's an
Hmm.
intentionality around that. Like for
Got it.
example, I have a renewal forecast call that's completely separate to the new logo
Hmm.
forecast call
Hmm.
and expand
Sure.
forecast call we do. There's more intentionality. And if I'm focused on it, that means everybody in my organization in the go to market org should be focused on it as well.
Good. All right. Makes sense. So tell us, from a sales and revenue growth, and then obviously that probably translates into hiring. As you think about that, what can you share about your plans for 2026?
Yeah. So, like I said, we've been selling for 3 years, and some of the big bets for me are really international. So we're investing a lot into EMEA, Northern Europe, Central Europe, and Southern Europe. We're also investing heavily into the channel and the partnerships because what you rightly called out when I
Okay.
said, hey, we're not a security company, that a lot of the best software companies have a very good distribution.
Hmm.
So for us, our distribution strategy is also we're going to sell direct, but I really want it to be focused on working through with partners. But we're going after 4 sets of partners. So you've got the big four, which are the big four consulting houses, your PwC, your KPMGs, your Deloittes of the world. Then it's like, hey, I need to be on the marketplace for all three hyperscalers. The third one is the regional VARs and the system integrators, so the GuidePoint Securities of the world, the Ahead, Trace3, WWT. So these kind of guys that are operate between a regional VAR to actually a regional SI, system integrator. And then the large Indian global outsourcer system integrators, because they often do outsource
Hmm.
contracts, but they own the
Hmm.
infrastructure for a lot of the global 2000. So that's another way. So for us, we're making those big bets really early on because that's actually going to help us.
And from a sales team perspective, how many are on the sales team roughly now, and about what are your hiring plans for
Yeah.
the end of the year?
I think at last count we were just north of about 130, and I think we should finish the year on about 200 globally.
Okay. All right. Solid. Okay, great. All right. So let's dig into some kind of more specifics in terms of techniques and tactics. Obviously, AI is very much still the topic on most people's minds when they're having a conversation about sales tactics these days. So how would you say AI is changing the way your team sells?
Yeah, so I think the thing with AI is that if you look at how long it took for the big cursors of the world, Claude
Hmm.
Code and whatnot, the leaps and bounds like that the LLMs are doing is just like it's mind blowing. So things are getting better and better, but the last bastion that hasn't been disrupted effectively is actually the sales and marketing stack. So I think a lot of what the focus for me is there's a lot of like areas where sales reps are spending a lot of time, like from a productivity basis. One of them actually top of mind was CPQ. And I was actually talking to one of our sales reps today and talking to a company. And I was like, I kind of want a CPQ to be very simply like the equivalent of somebody's like trying to talk to like ChatGPT or Claude Code. And there's a company there
Hmm.
that talking to actually
Okay.
do that. All of a sudden it's a delight moment that it makes it so easier. But then there's pockets that have been kind of created around, hey, how do you go and do account research and stuff? So for me, one of the things I've actually tasked my director of sales productivity, we've actually got a title, our name is Ariel. What I've actually tasked her is I said, go and do an audit of where our sales team are spending their time. Because I feel like, and I use the phrase feel, I feel like we have a
Hmm.
lot of tools, but there's not really a strategy around how to utilize that. So it's a big focus area for mine. And it's also a big focus area of like, how can you minimize the number of tools that they have, but they have the best tools to help them at the points where they're spending their time. For me, account research is always one that they spend a
Hmm.
lot of time on. PQ is another one. Content creation's another one. So I'm trying to figure out where are the snippets that we can, because our customers are really our sales reps. So you want
Mhm.
them to
Mm.
spend time with our customers and our prospects,
Right, right.
managing up or managing internally.
Okay. So tell me how specifically for your sales motion, Chainguard, you mentioned you think of as an engineering product. How do you think your sellers should be thinking about selling that as an engineering product versus other categories that you might have sold in or other verticals that other sellers might be coming from if they're hoping to maybe sell for Chainguard?
Yeah. So I think the commonality I've seen is people that have sold to multiple personas. So there's a lot of out there that you can get away with selling to a single persona. There's a lot of organizations you can get away with, but not getting to the true economic buyer. But
Mm,
when you've got multiple personas involved, the best reps that have been successful have been the ones that have sold to multiple personas. Because inherently there's two pots of money in every company that you want to sell to on this planet. And the two pots of money are what I call run the business, what is keeping the lights on, and what is
mhm,
the business. What is changing something in a 10K, or what is changing something that's going to unlock another fundraise for a hot startup? So once you start to figure out that, like, hey, there's run the business, change the business, you can then start to look at the type of sellers. When you couple with people that have sold multiple persona, but they've sold a product that can tap into two buying centers from run the business, change the business, all of a sudden they're the ones that are successful and hitting the ground running.
Yeah, that's interesting because you think of like run the business in terms of infrastructure and all the things that have been budgeted, but then obviously, there's different people thinking about how do I invest in growth, and so trying to tap into both of
Yeah,
those
and
pools is an interesting approach.
what you've got to remember is CFOs give a
Hmm.
budget to a CIO or a
Sure,
CTO,
sure.
and they're literally saying the CIO CTO come up with a plan that they need a budget increase of 50,
Hmm.
100, 200 million. The CFO's having a conversation saying, "Hey, that's great, but I'm also expecting some efficiencies. So while I
Mm,
am going to give you more budget, I'm banking on the fact that the AWS
hmm.
Datadog renewal, your
Right, right.
ServiceNow renewal, like you're going to
Sure.
trim something or you're going to deprecate something, you're going to platform something out." So they might, if they went in and asked for 100 million, they're going to say, "Hey, well, I'm only giving you 70. I'm expecting that you're going to like generate 20 to 30 million in savings if you want to do that 100 new." So all of a sudden, the
Yeah.
CIO, CTO starts to say, "Well, how can I sweat the asset, pushing as
Hmm.
much as I can through my AWS? Because if I can start to put more through AWS, it starts to get cheaper." So it's figuring out all these levers of like how you want to engage and starting to figure that out.
Okay. So you mentioned experience, perspective on selling to multiple personas. Are there other things that you look for in sellers? So let's be real, it's a challenging market out there for sales reps because there's so much interest in certain orgs, especially in orgs that are really highly rated. What do you look for, or your team look for in terms of like the background of a seller that would be a perfect fit for your team?
Yeah, someone who's had experience in a non-branded software company. And the reason I use the phrase
Okay.
non-branded is,
Interesting.
yeah, that's non-branded is
Hmm.
like Chainguard 3 years from now is
Right.
going to be a very different beast to what Chainguard is
For
now.
sure.
So I always look at the people that have been successful in a non-branded software company when they were going through the
Yeah.
growth period.
Yeah.
They're the ones that I call I use the phrase they're hustlers, right?
Hmm.
They they figure out how, like, they find a way to get in. Now, no disrespect, there's loads of big companies out there like IBMs and Microsofts of the world, Salesforce, but you can walk in because of the name on the business card. Like you will, everybody
Right.
has Cisco
Yep.
spend or Microsoft spend. So you can sit in with a C-suite and you get a seat at the table, but it takes real courageousness and city to break in to somewhere where it's an unbranded software company that they don't know about. And it's like, it could be small and it could be small just in maturity. Like, let's take Snowflake, for example. The meeting Snowflake probably gets now are very different than the meeting Snowflakes
Right.
were getting with Chris Degnan and the team when
Mhm.
they were around in 2016, 2017. Very, very different.
Yeah. I love that. Love that. Okay. Let's change it up a little bit. What do you think is something that isn't discussed enough or that maybe people don't think about enough, specifically in terms of sales careers? So factors that reps should be considering that maybe isn't always top of mind.
Yeah. So I think the pendulum swung a little bit more the other way post COVID, that everybody just wanted to go and work remote. Now, I
Hmm.
know the irony, we're a remote company.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's the irony in that, but I find that getting face to face in the field is really, really key. Now, that
Okay.
doesn't mean everyone's going to go back to offices and everyone's going to be
Hmm.
consistently in the field. But if you think about how we sell, like you're trying to build trust with somebody who hasn't bought your software before. And when you want to build trust, you got to get to know them. You got to like try and
Hmm.
build a champion of you, but a champion of your product and your company. Well, that's a hell of a lot harder doing that on Zoom, but it becomes
Yeah,
much
for sure.
easier. It becomes much easier when you're on site, because what happens is it's the how many Zooms we all get on, and we context switch so quickly
Hmm.
since COVID, but it's when you get signed in to go to the meeting and you're
Right.
sitting in the foyer and you bump into somebody that you've been trying to get hold of.
Hmm.
It's then going to the meeting. It's reading the body language of all the other people around the table. And then it's wrapping up and you're getting walked back to the reception and like debriefing with somebody like, how do you think that went? That was a tough question. Why was that? Well, you lose all of that over Zoom. All that over Zoom, right? So I think there's a point where I always look at it for impact meetings. So in our sales campaign, we talk about impact meetings, and I say, look, listen,
Hmm.
if you know you've got an impact meeting, find a way to get on site. And the irony is, the harder you work, the luckier that you get. And that I
Hmm.
use that phrase a lot because nothing bad happens when you're on site. You end up maybe sitting in a coffee, like a canteen, and the person you were trying to get
Hmm.
hold of walks by, and your champion or your coach introduces them, and all of a sudden, it's unlocked the deal. And the person might have seen your email, but he just literally said, I've got so many other things. I get hit so much electronically that the irony is there was this situation where the Salesforce rep figured out me and the CEO and some of our team were in a bar in San Francisco and turned up and I was like,
Okay.
well, I really appreciate that. I was like, I
You
like
respect
that.
the game.
Yeah, you got
Yeah.
respect.
Right. Right. For sure. For sure. Yeah. No, that's really interesting to hear. It's kind of an interesting way to think about sort of people talk about, hybrid, right, as terms of in office and remote. But, the way you frame it is almost like specifically sales hybrid, where like, sure, you're remote, but like a lot of your sales activity happens in person,
Yeah.
which is an interesting way to frame it.
And look, it's going to be very different for different companies. Like we don't have offices. We have one headquarters, and it's a small office in New York, and we're going
Mm,
to put another one into London because we just need it like a hub. The goal is pretty simple. You just got to be more out in the field in the
right.
impact meeting, because that's the
Yeah.
thing. And the impact meetings are the ones that change the trajectory of the
Hmm.
deal.
Yeah, you mentioned that phrase a couple of times, impact meeting. Tell me a little bit more about that, specifically in the context
Right.
of how a good sales leader contributes to that in supporting
Yeah.
the team.
So number one, I always view impact meetings as the toughest meetings that a
Okay.
sales rep has to do. So know that
Okay.
they're the toughest. I've told my leaders, and it's something I hold myself accountable. A rep shouldn't be doing that on their own. You need to be
Hmm.
in there to help them, because their quota doesn't get a split because you've turned up to the meeting. You're just
Hmm.
de-risked. So if you think of the impact meetings in our sales campaign, the impact meetings, they're between half a dozen to a dozen to maybe a dozen and a half, but they
Okay.
always follow 6 core paths. The new business meeting, the first time you meet the customer, that's a tough one. You're trying to build credibility. You're trying to define the problem. You're trying to differentiate yourself from the competition. The second one is the first time they meet the potential champion, or they figure out there's a potential champion. Then it's like the third one is they're setting the decision criteria for the technical validation or the business case or whatever it might be. Then it's the fourth one is the first time they meet the economic buyer, the true budget holder who's got
Ooh.
discretionary spend. The fifth one is when they're replaying the business case or the tech validation event back to the economic buyer. And the sixth one is some form of procurement meeting. Now, in
Okay.
any campaign, that could be 6, it could be a dozen, it could be a dozen and a half, it could be 2
Hmm.
dozen, depend on the
Yeah.
size of the deal. And the reason I came up with this concept of the impact meetings is when the deal closes, you look back and go, huh,
Hmm.
we moved the ball in that meeting.
Right.
And the common DNA that I looked at of like a lot of deals that were closed won and also closed lost was
Hmm.
actually our presence in the impact meeting. So what starts to happen is if a leader's going to that impact meeting, the sales rep and the SE, they prep better. But
Right.
here's what
Right.
you hire great people because they prep better and the outcome is infinitely better.
Hmm.
Is they're always going to prep like that even when you're not in the room.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
the other thing is, because they see the value of the leader, they'll like look 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks out and saying, hey, I'm trying to get to that EB like by the end of March, and I need to get to him because then it's going to take us 3 weeks to get into
Mm.
procurement. everything we're doing now is reverse engineering to be ready for that meeting. And what happens is sales reps have more control of their business.
Yeah. No, it's funny. That reminds me of a conversation I had recently where somebody characterized that, a very high percentage of the work that, that highly effective salespeople do is sort of project management. It's trying to make sure that all the pieces are aligned and foresee the potential pitfalls and blockers and unblock them and put the right people in the right place. And it sounds like the impact meetings are sort of those critical milestones along the way.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about strategies for growing a sales team aggressively, because that's something that you've done several times in terms of hiring and things like that. What have you learned in your sales leadership roles about how to sort of do that rapidly while avoiding some of the pitfalls that a lot of fast growing orgs will see, like kind of a turn and burn environment, or, territories getting sliced too thin? Like, what are some of the things to be aware of there?
Yeah. So a couple of things is that you have a duty of care if you're hiring somebody to make them successful. So the first thing is like, how do you onboard them so you can minimize time to ramp? We uniquely built a curated experience of, like, 3-4 weeks where they're doing self-paced learning, which is no more than about 2 hours a week, I think, or 2.5 hours a week. So it's got to be bite-sized enough that they can do it. So nothing's really more than 15 to 30-minute bite-sized self-paced courses. Then what we do is we get them into bootcamp 1. And bootcamp 1 is a 3-day in-person where we focus on, the landscape, the differentiation, the problem that we solve, the persona, how to pipeline generate, how to be really lethal in delivering the first meeting deck, and how to think about identifying champions. So what you do is you spend 3 days, it's in person, fly everybody in, whether you're a BDR, sales rep, sales leader, SE leader. Then we put them back out into the field for, anywhere between another 4 to 8 weeks. Normally, the optimum is about 8 weeks. Then we bring them back to boot camp 2. But when we bring them back to boot camp 2, you can only come to boot camp 2 if you have 2 deals like greater than stage 2. And I'll tell you the rationale why. Because what you want to do is when you bring them back in, you're going to teach them how to build champions. You're going to teach them how to do 3 Ys. You're going to teach to do a POV, how to build a business case, how to negotiate. And the real ROI is if they have 2 deals, you're actually bringing them back in and it's actually they're working on their deals. So it's not theoretical. So when they leave at the end of that second boot camp, that 3 days, all you're watching for is how long does it take to close those 2 deals and what's going on. And the great is it fosters intimacy with my leaders, myself, because ironically, this week is our first bootcamp 1 in San Ramon, near where I live, and we've actually got 3 days. So I take my time out to be present in those 3 days. So if sales are conceived, well, the CRO takes 3 days out to sit in camps, not just sit in them, deliver key content. It goes to the point, I'll never ask you to do something that I won't show you how to do it. So it's really bootcamp 1 and bootcamp 2, I'm present and running sessions with the world-class enablement and productivity team we have here.
Yeah, so it becomes more of like a workshop than just like a training where you're being lectured
So then
to.
what
Interesting.
happens is because you have
makes sense.
the intimacy at those deals, and if you've got, think about it, if 35 people come through bootcamp 2, salespeople, 35 salespeople come through bootcamp 2, and they've all brought 2 deals that are going to get live worked on. That's 70 deals that I know.
A lot of pipeline.
Deals that I know have got a plan. And
Yeah,
again,
I like it.
and what happens is because they win, because they've got that plan, they have a recipe for success. So they're like, well, I did it for my first 2. Why would I change?
Right. That makes sense. Okay, cool. All right, let's dig into the RepVue perspective on this, right? And your RepVue profile specifically.
Sure.
We'll touch on some of the details there, some of the questions we get, and even some of the reviews.
Should I be sitting down?
I think you're going to be okay. But we'll see. There's a few parts that we're going to dig into, and that it's a pretty impressive. But there are a few questions that come up, so we'll touch on those too. But I would be remiss if I didn't start by saying the score is fantastic, right? You guys have a 91 score. You have got an outstanding RepVue profile. We just did the Reppy Awards. You guys won 6 Reppy Awards. So that's fantastic. And not only did you win awards, but you won them in the areas that sales reps care about the most, right? Which are comp is important, like market fit is important, and quota attainment. Those are the three things that, like, when I look at a role, I look at, and you guys are crushing it in all of those, which is fantastic. So I would say to kind of dig in there, product market fit, I think, is the thing that um for me is a non-negotiable when I'm looking
Yes.
at, if I was looking at a sales org that I wanted to join. How does you guys are in the just about the 90th percentile for product market fit? How does that manifest itself for a seller who's out in the field like you described, selling for Chainguard?
Yeah. So the thing with product market fit for us is there's differing levels of what I would call product market fit because you need the technology to be there as well. But because obviously we secure containers, the first kind of thing that we look at is, well, hold on, number one, are they like, a cloud-based type company? And you might think,
Hmm.
well, certain Wall Street institutions aren't cloud-based, they've still got data centers, but
Hmm.
they have platforms and teams and new application development that is moving in that direction. Then it's like, hey, well, every company uses software libraries, but then, on that product, we still have some work to do to get coverage, right? But as we get coverage, it's just going to go through. So it's figuring out for each of your products, what's the product market fit. It's not just what's the product market
Mm,
fit in Guard. You got to think of it from
interesting.
a product. You got to think of it from a product perspective.
On a line by line level.
Yeah. And then when you think from a product perspective, you align that to, okay, let's look at it like, how am I building the Venn diagram for my patch? Because I've tiered my patch, tier A, tier B, tier C. And it's like, okay, what's a good fit for containers versus libraries? What's a good fit for VMs versus containers? So it's trying to figure all that out. And because the only thing that happens when you launch a new product like we did last year, we launched libraries and VMs, is you're actually building a startup within a startup.
Okay.
Because you have a
Hmm.
startup, but you got to take that
Right.
mindset. Like, I'm creating another startup, so we're going to launch more stuff this year. Like, what our
Hmm.
engineering team doing is they've lost either shipping at, but they're all going to have to go and figure out product market fit. And
Sure.
here's why I go back to the hiring of coming from a non-branded software company. You want people who are curious, because guess what? Not all the bets of everything that you ship are going to pay off.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's the idea of having the startup within the startup mentality. You got to be okay to say, do you know what? I'm not going to go and double click it on that product anymore. We're going to just park it. You got to be,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So, let's talk about comp. Reps are in sales because they can make a lot of money. That's definitely one of the motivations for good salespeople. You guys are in the 97th percentile for both base and incentive comp. It's obviously a deliberate choice. Tell us about the philosophy behind paying at the top of the market like that.
But yeah, it's pretty simple. You got to pay A players what they're worth.
Hmm. Yeah, fair enough.
And when you're looking at people, think about what we're asking them to do. We're asking
Hmm.
them to get on planes or spend time in the field. We're asking them
Yeah,
to
sure.
pipeline dinner. We're asking them to build champions. We're asking them to go and take a non-branded software company like Chainguard, and
Hmm.
you're creating a category. This didn't exist like 3 years ago. Didn't even exist
Hmm.
a year, or 18 months ago. So the point I'm trying to say is a lot of reasons, because 1 in 7,500 companies ever gets to 100 million in ARR, and 1 in 12,300 companies ever gets to 200 million in ARR. We're asking people to go and do something that hasn't been done, or that the odds of them being successful haven't been done. So you got to make sure that you're looking for a unique person. You're looking for lions and lionesses to come in
Hmm.
and, like, sell when like, the deck is stacked against them.
Yeah, no, makes sense. Makes sense. Cool. All right, so let's jump into some of the specific reviews actually on RepVue, and talk about sort of the follow up question that maybe a rep didn't have the chance to ask or to dig into. So we'll do that now. So there's a lot of positives first. So I'll just pick one because I noticed something about it that kind of caught my eye. It said I wouldn't change a thing. Okay, great. They're doing what they need to do in order to arrive seriously in a complicated space. That caught my attention. It's just an interesting way to frame it. What does arriving seriously look like for Chainguard sales orgs right now?
Yeah, so I think I put it back to, there's three phases when you build a software company. So from 0 to 10, you're trying to get product market fit. From
Hmm.
10 to 25, you're trying to basically repeat said product market fit. And then after 25 above, like, you're scaling. So
Hmm. Okay.
I think what's happening is our growth, by the way, that what we've had is we kind of missed that second stage. We missed
Okay.
repeatability.
The,
So that's where this
okay.
that's why there's intentionality in the onboarding journey, for example. There's intentionality in how we sell. There's intentionality in the channel and the partnerships investment, is because we're trying to get repeatability, like fixed repeatability. That's why the hiring profile is slightly different as well. So
Hmm.
that person, whoever wrote that, using that phrase, arriving seriously, is probably citing some of the kind of like the tectonic blocks that we're putting in.
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
last thing you want to do is build a house on poor foundation. So then the
Hmm.
question, kind of laying the foundations. And I always use this phrase a lot. Chainguard's a victim of its own success because it's grown
Hmm.
so fast from an ARR perspective and headcount that sometimes you got to say like, hey, we're changing the engines as we're over the Atlantic Ocean, but
Right, right, sure.
we still got to go and land at London.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay. Another thing I noticed in a lot of the reviews is just a lot of comments about the culture. They call supportive, collaborative, transparent. You talked about sales leaders, showing up and supportive reps. What would you say that you've seen that either confirms that or even that surprised you as part of the greater Chain Guard culture that you joined in the last several months?
Yeah, I can't take any credit of that. The culture was already there before I came in. For me, what I've observed is anytime something's going well, something's going bad, like the company, and I mean the leadership team right up to our CEO, Dan, they
Hmm.
swarm the individual or the deal. But not only that, they care about people, right?
Mm,
They
yeah.
genuinely care about people, and you've got to, because like when you spend, like, sales isn't easy. When you spend 5 days a week, long hours away from loved ones, when things wrap up on a Friday, are they basically demoralized or like fatigued
Hmm.
and frustrated,
Yeah.
or are they like finishing Friday going, I left it all out on the pitch and I can't wait till next week?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
You want the latter, not the former.
Yeah, no doubt.
I personally feel that the culture is like that. I feel supported. My biggest challenge, and my EA said this, like, the CEO's chief of staff, Katie, has said this as well. She's
Hmm.
like, Parm, you don't say no enough. And I say, I
Mm,
know I can't say no. It's because I like to help. And it's
mhm.
like, more that you get in people's eyes. Like, I always say, like, listen, my SLAs, if you Slack me, email me, text me, or call me, I'll definitely call you back the same day.
Yeah.
Or you
Yeah, I
Slack,
can.
get that.
Yeah,
So if
can
I'm
confirm.
yeah, if I'm like that, I know my ELT is like that. I know my boss is like the CEO is like that. I know my team is like that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Great. All right. Well, let's jump into to some of the tougher ones then, because no sales order is perfect, chain guard included. So here's one that I kind of thought was interesting. So this is a current employee talked about. They said growing pains from an organizational standpoint, and they said they talked about new competitors entering the market and how that can be somewhat of a challenge. So, as the CRO, sort of refining the sales motion with the things that you talked about, um, you know, is that a big part of why you were brought in as far as changes in the competitive dynamic, or how would you frame that for sales reps as they think about the competitive market changing?
Yeah. So number one, it's great that there's competitors in a market. It means it validates the space, right?
For sure.
So I've been lucky enough to be, like I said, I was at a company called Dynamics, and we were the eighth APM vendor to enter the market.
Mm,
By the time we got acquired by Cisco, every deal was literally a 3-horse race: New Relic, Dynatrace, and us. And then obviously
okay.
when we got acquired by Cisco, Datadog was just growing like exponentially
Hmm.
fast. A great engineering culture, and like they went on a massive tear. But we were the eighth vendor that entered a crowded market, but our execution got us there. So number one, it's actually a positive sign, I view, that you got competitors coming in because they're getting VC backed money, but they're anywhere from 1/10 to,
Hmm.
1/5 the size of you from an ARR and
Yeah.
headcount perspective. And then you've got some guys that are in the platform space that try and sell something that's just good enough. You've got to respect the competition, but not be scared of the competition. So it means that, like, I use that phrase a lot. I said, hey, we're not scared of anybody. We respect them, right? Because clearly
Hmm.
they're on the same journey as you, as wanting to secure open source software. But secondly, it takes a lot of guts to start a startup, right? Because
Hmm.
all the odds are stacked against you. So you got to respect the people that are on that journey because they're doing the same thing you're trying to do. So I look at it a bit like that. In terms of like just the refining kind of the sales motion in the organization, I think we have started to refine the sales process because we didn't have any entry or exit criteria of how we sold. didn't think about how we intentionally build champions. We didn't think about getting to the economic buyer early. We didn't think
Mm,
about um, how do we lay landmines when we do proof of value or tech events. Here's the thing. It was happening in people's heads. There was a lot
mhm,
of artists, and that's okay. I always use the phrase, and this is what I used. There are pockets of excellence at Chainguard that weren't democratized or prioritized. So
mm,
actually, a lot of what I've been doing is working with my team, seeing best practices like in the Northeast, they might be doing
mhm,
something really good. The team in Central and the Mike Ficini might be doing something really good. Like there's a topic around how to do EBRs, and we kind of like solidified that. The guys in the UK are spending like doing a lot of PG, like personal PG. So you're starting to stitch all this
mhm.
together, and actually the pockets were here. So I find I'm more orchestrating stuff that was already in the business, hence the phrase prioritize and democratize.
Okay. All right, good. So let me dig into one more specific thing that I saw come up, which was one of the reviewers mentioned a tough ramp period, said that the ramp was pretty challenging. What does ramp look like at Chainguard? And are you, do you try to do anything to kind of improve that sentiment?
Yeah, so number one, when I turned up, that was one of the things I changed was the definition of ramp. Candidly, we had it wrong because remember, if you the three phases of a software company,
Hmm.
product market fit, repeatability, and then scale. Well, your ramp changes in all three of those. Now, if you've gone through those phases, if you think about it, because 0 to 10 is product market fit, 10 to 25 is repeatability, 25 and above is scale. If you've blasted through those three things within 12 months, guess what? Your
Mm.
ramp
Yeah.
options are out the window. That's what happened to us. We blasted through in 12 months. We went from product market fit to aggressively scaling because the ARR said we could. But what
Mm.
happened? We got that wrong.
Interesting.
So what I did was I reset the ramp to actually track time taken to do two deals of an average size for the cohort. So the SMB org is time taken to do two deals of a certain size. Our corporate team is different. Our international is different. Our enterprise is different. So it's more of a more bulletproof measure. Hence why I track how long, like, the two deals to come back to bootcamp two. Because now I'm stitching together how I'm enabling people to
Hmm.
how I'm going to decrease their time to ramp.
Got it. So that training session essentially corresponds to a phase or a checkpoint in the ramp, it sounds like, for
Exactly.
the boot camp too. Okay. All right, cool.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, like, and it's expected, by the way, because I haven't
Hmm.
done it a couple of times, that your
Yeah.
ramp will change. Like the ramp
Hmm.
won't be static. The ramp, like when we're at, the irony is the ramp when you're at 500 million is infinitely shorter than where the ramp is now.
Interesting. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. No, I think when you align it with the three phases that you talked about, and then it's interesting when you sort of switch phases multiple times within a 1 year cycle, and you think about sort of comp plans and ramp and things that are based on certain assumptions. If you move so fast that those fundamental assumptions are different before you get through that next cycle, then you can see how that would introduce some challenges. So I think that's an interesting way
Totally.
to frame it.
Totally. But we went from product market fit to going into scale mode. And it was just like in that 12 months. And the thing is, like, everyone's got a plan till they get punched in the face, as Mike
Right.
Tyson
Right.
used
For
to
sure.
say.
For sure. Yes. All right. So let's switch gears again and let's talk about what it's like to be successful at Chainguard. So let's frame it like this. What would you say is one habit that, the vast majority of sellers who are successful at Chainguard have? What stands out?
They can pipeline generate and they're natural champion
Okay.
builders.
Okay.
Champion build, like, because
Yeah.
that's the thing. I wouldn't even just say chain guard. I think, and the best orgs I've been a part of or
Hmm.
even observed, that's been two core themes that they can do. Like, because if they can build pipeline generate and they can build champions, they can run any sales process, command any
Hmm.
premium, and always get access to money because a champion will get you to the economic buyer.
Good. And then let's talk a little bit about career advancement. So what does the promotion path look like? And what percentage of AEs, for example, would you say come from in-house versus outside hires?
Yeah, so we've promoted a bunch. We just promoted a kid called Ash, who was one of our BDRs, to a kind of like commercial account exec down in Australia, and then
Hmm.
obviously done a bunch of promotions from our first line to second line. So for me, like the way I look at it, it's just a macro theme is in most of your roles, you should have the 2/3, 1/3 ratio. So 2/3 should be internal, 1/3 should be external. So that's something I try and hold myself accountable and kind of watch. And when we look at it, that are we actually running to that? Sometimes there's going to be years where you can't do that. And the reason
Hmm.
you do that is you're blitzing through the growth like we did. But when you start to sensibly altitude it out, that really should be a North Star that you should look at, 2/3 internal,
Hmm.
1/3 external. So what that allows you to do is, people who know the culture, people who've been successful as a rep, successful as a first line. So they're stepping up through the gear, successful as a BDR, going into a commercial role. But then you're also injecting new blood,
Yeah.
right? So you're keeping a good balance. That means
Right. Right.
your culture stays at top and point. Like all the strengths we talked about the culture earlier on the call, that'll stay intact as you scale if
Hmm.
you the 2/3, 1/3.
Got it. So, and then one other specific detail, obviously you're selling a product that is, as you characterize, an engineering product. How technical do you expect reps to be, or should they hope to be successful at Chainguard?
So technical is always an interesting question. I've sold a lot of technical products in my career, and my
Hmm.
last role at Benchling, where we were selling to R&D departments, right, and we were talking about gene editing and
Right.
stuff that I would glaze
Hmm.
over at meetings, right, because I was so
Hmm.
passionate my wheelhouse, but I knew that there was a business outcome they were trying to drive. So the best
Hmm.
seller I've seen is, sure, they can respect the technical questions and they're self-aware enough to know this is what my SE is going to handle, but they're actually asking the questions of why is that important? Like, what does that allow you to do, or what's the impact of that?
Hmm. Got it.
They take the said technical questions that are coming up and they're trying to elevate the conversation to say, well, why is this happening? What is it happening?
Hmm.
So it's advantageous that you've sold a multi-persona product to like development shops and security
Hmm.
shops, stuff like that. But it's not like a prerequisite by any
Right.
stretch.
So it's more about translating that into business value and having some
Bingo.
experience doing that in another environment. Makes sense.
100%.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. All right. So let's, if you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about, I would love to hear your perspective on how RepVue has impacted your business, or how you see RepVue from a chain guard perspective. Because to be honest, Ryan Walsh founded RepVue to help people find orgs like Chainguard. I mean,
Yeah.
to be completely candid. And so it's great to have this conversation and hear about your experience. How does RepVue kind of come into the conversation from your side, if it does?
Yeah, so I think it falls into kind of two buckets that I think of, like where you guys have helped, and it's really been
Hmm.
like top of funnel and awareness. So we've got a
Okay.
world like talent team
Hmm.
here, and I'm amazed with some of the people that they've hired because they really are truly world class. They're really good at what they do, the companies they've come from. So
Hmm.
that is happening because they're world class recruiters, but also by platforms like yourself. So like really from top of funnel, I would kind of class that as awareness. And then the
Hmm.
other thing is really when you get into the closing stage or the bottom of the funnel. I think that's an area that we see because what people will do is always go back and have a look and like see what the benchmarks are. And they know that they're getting a fair offer, an equitable offer for, the role, the stage that they're joining at. So
Hmm.
I think the two areas that I would say is like always like top of funnel for awareness and then kind of like bottom of the funnel around like, helping the candidates, whichever role it is to close an offer.
No, it's great to hear. I appreciate that. Okay, so just to close things out, let's sort of do some forward-looking commentary. What are a few predictions that you have about 2026 from either the sales side or the technology side, or maybe how they overlap?
Yeah, so I think obviously it'd be remiss if I didn't say AI. So I think AI is disrupting companies out there, and no longer can you get away with you can't AI wash your product. You can't just
Hmm.
have a
Hmm.
chatbot bolt on. That ain't going to work,
Right.
right? So
Right.
inherently, it's around like, I think a lot of companies will get disrupted by AI and a lot of companies are. And I think you saw the recent impact to some of these security stocks and, you know,
Hmm. For
certain
sure.
product companies will get hits at certain companies like will acquire other products to get themselves out of there. But I think what's happened from like DevOps engineers and developers, how they're using Claude Code and the
Hmm.
curse of the world, I think the sales stack is gonna get I think the trough of disillusionment or underwhelming on go-to-market tools around I think
Hmm.
past that. I
Okay.
think is the year where the same kind of disruption that helped like, great developers become like X or 10x better developers, I think that's going to happen to the sales rep. The world class
Hmm.
sales is going to become a 10x sales rep. So I think that's where it's coming. And there's a lot of exciting tools out there. And as a CRO, get purview to a lot through the VC community, but there's a lot out there. And I think more and more, it's like if you can make the rep more productive and you can take administrative but impactful work off their plate and
Hmm.
just on that, I think that's kind of an area. So I know you asked for three, but I gave you two.
No, no, it's okay. Well, one other question that I realized I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, because I was just thinking about this, and it happened recently prior to sort of the previous conversation that you and I had. So you mentioned security and engineering structure around open source, and then obviously we're talking about AI. Well, one of the hottest topics that people are talking about is kind of Claude bot, autonomous AI, based on an open source infrastructure, right? So do you see that kind of conversation, or maybe more importantly, just the fear that you can see in the eyes of, probably most CIOs and certainly security officers that you encounter as a tailwind for platforms like yours, where people are both excited about those opportunities, but also at the same time, pretty terrified about the security vulnerabilities that they open up in their infrastructure?
It's a tailwind for us, right? And it's a simple tailwind because there isn't an issue around generating code now. It's
Hmm.
based code review and
Hmm.
secure code.
Yeah.
We've eclipsed to the point where like, hey, I can't develop like enough. We're
Hmm.
now at the point that there's too much you can't review. So then it
Hmm.
starts, and that's why it's a tailwind for us because if you can
Yeah.
say, well, is it reduced? You don't need to review it because it's secure by default.
Right. Right. Interesting.
And like, two out of the three big platform providers, the customers of ours. So that's another
Mm.
validation.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. No, it seems like a really exciting space to be in for sure. Awesome. That's great. Well, thank you so
Yeah,
much,
100.
Parm. I really appreciate your time. I think this conversation will be incredibly interesting for sellers. I know they're interested in Chainguard. We can see it on RepVue, and it's great that they'll have a chance to hear straight from you. So really appreciate that.